At 12 years old, he was beaten so badly by a group of classmates that he had to be hospitalized. The attack left him unconscious, bruised, and struggling to breathe. For days, the physical pain was unbearable. But what hurt even more wasn't the beating itself. It was the realization that no one was coming to save him. Years later, the world would know him as Elon Musk, the man behind Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, Starlink, and one of the wealthiest people in history. A billionaire who would redefine entire industries and challenge the limits of technology. But before the rockets, before the electric cars, before the billions, before becoming one of the most influential people alive, Elon Musk was just a lonely boy growing up in South Africa, trying to survive a childhood that often felt like a prison. Most people think Elon Musk's story begins with PayPal, Tesla, or SpaceX. It doesn't. It begins in Pretoria, South Africa, during the 1970s, in a country divided by political tension and social instability. His mother, May Musk, was a successful model and dietitian. His father, Elon Musk, was an engineer. On paper, it looked like the perfect family: intelligent parents, financial stability, opportunity. But appearances rarely tell the full story. Behind closed doors, life was far more complicated than anyone could see. From a very young age, Elon was different. While other children ran around outside chasing soccer balls or playing games with friends, Elon preferred books, endless books, science fiction, encyclopedias, physics, history, philosophy. He wasn't just reading for fun. He was consuming information almost obsessively. Family members would later recall that he could spend 10 hours straight reading without noticing time passing. Sometimes people thought he wasn't listening during conversations because he would stare into space for long periods. Adults even wondered if he had hearing problems. They took him to doctors for medical examinations, believing something might be wrong. The truth was much simpler. Elon wasn't ignoring the world. He was thinking. His mind had already become a place more interesting than the reality around him. That imagination quickly became his greatest refuge. Because school wasn't a safe place. It was brutal. Elon wasn't the strongest kid. He wasn't the most popular. He wasn't interested in fitting in. And children often attack what they don't understand. He was bullied relentlessly, day after day, week after week. They mocked the way he spoke, the way he acted, the books he carried, the questions he asked. He wasn't like everyone else, and in school, being different often comes with a price. But the bullying wasn't limited to insults. It became physical, violent. One day, a group of boys surrounded him. They punched him repeatedly. They kicked him while he was already on the ground. They continued long after he could no longer defend himself. By the time teachers intervened, Elon had been beaten unconscious. He spent time recovering in the hospital. Decades later, he would still mention that attack as one of the most painful experiences of his childhood. But strangely, it wasn't the event itself that changed him the most. It was what came after. He realized that life wasn't fair, that people could hurt you without reason, and that if he wanted to build a different future, he couldn't rely on anyone else to create it for him. Home wasn't always the escape many people imagine. Elon has spoken publicly about having a difficult relationship with his father. Although Elon Musk was an intelligent engineer and taught him many technical concepts, their relationship became increasingly complicated over the years. Elon has described parts of his childhood with his father as emotionally painful and has said there were moments that deeply affected him. Whether it was criticism, emotional distance, or the feeling that nothing was ever good enough, home often became another place where he felt isolated rather than understood. Looking back, it's easy to see how those experiences shaped him. When children don't receive emotional security, they often search for control somewhere else. For Elon, that control came through knowledge. Books became his closest friends. They never judged him. They never laughed at him. They never abandoned him. Through books, he traveled to distant galaxies, imagined civilizations on Mars, learned about inventors who changed history, and discovered that the greatest breakthroughs almost always came from people who were considered unusual. Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein. These weren't ordinary people, they were outsiders. And perhaps for the first time, Elon began seeing his own differences not as weaknesses, but as possibilities. Then something happened that would quietly change the direction of his entire life forever. At around 10 years old, Elon discovered computers. Remember, this was the early 1980s. Personal computers were still a novelty. Most children barely understood what they were. But Elon became fascinated almost instantly. He didn't just want to play games. He wanted to understand how they worked. So he bought a programming manual and taught himself computer programming entirely on his own. No teacher, no mentor, no internet tutorials. Just a book, endless curiosity, and relentless persistence. While other kids spent afternoons outside, Elon spent countless hours writing lines of code, making mistakes, fixing them, and trying again. It wasn't glamorous. There were no audiences, no applause, just a child solving problems because solving problems made him feel alive. At only 12 years old, he created his first video game. It was called Blaster, a simple space shooter where players defended themselves against alien cargo ships carrying dangerous weapons. By today's standards, it was incredibly basic, but that's not what mattered. What mattered was that a 12-year-old boy had taught himself how to build software from nothing. Even more remarkably, he sold the game's source code to a computer magazine for about $500. $500 wasn't life-changing money, but psychologically, it meant everything. For the first time, an idea inside his head had become something valuable in the real world. That lesson stayed with him forever. Ideas could become products. Products could change lives. And imagination, if combined with relentless execution, could create opportunity. As Elon entered his teenage years, another realization became impossible to ignore. South Africa didn't feel like the future he imagined. The country was politically unstable. Mandatory military service was approaching, and he strongly opposed the apartheid system that still shaped the nation. He dreamed of something bigger. America. Silicon Valley. Space exploration. Innovation. The companies building tomorrow weren't in Pretoria. They were somewhere else, somewhere across the ocean, somewhere he had never been but already believed he belonged. Most people dream about leaving. Very few actually do it. Leaving meant abandoning familiarity, friends, and the only life he had ever known. It meant uncertainty. It meant risk. It meant stepping into a future with no guarantees. But Elon had already learned something during childhood. Remaining comfortable often means remaining trapped. Growth almost always requires discomfort. So at 17 years old, he made one of the boldest decisions of his life. Instead of staying in South Africa, he moved to Canada through his mother's citizenship. He had little money, no powerful connections, and no clear roadmap. Just ambition. Immense ambition. The reality of Canada was far less glamorous than people imagine. Elon worked whatever jobs he could find. He cleaned boilers inside lumber mills. He shoveled grain. He worked physically exhausting jobs that paid just enough to survive. Some days were brutally difficult. But unlike many people around him, Elon wasn't thinking about next week. He was thinking about the next 20 years. Every difficult job became temporary in his mind because he believed something larger was waiting. That ability to delay gratification would become one of the defining characteristics of his entire career. Eventually, he enrolled at Queen's University before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania in the United States. There, he studied physics and economics simultaneously. Most students struggle with one demanding subject. Elon intentionally chose two. Physics taught him how the universe works. Economics taught him how markets work. Without realizing it, he was building the exact combination of knowledge that would later allow him to disrupt industries most people considered impossible to change. During college, While many students focused on parties and campus life, Elon remained obsessed with ideas, renewable energy, artificial intelligence, the internet, humanity becoming a multiplanetary species. These weren't business plans yet. They were simply questions that refused to leave his mind. One professor later recalled that Elon wasn't interested in ordinary careers. He wasn't asking how to get a good job. He was asking how civilization itself could be improved. That difference may seem subtle, but it changes everything. Most people choose careers based on income. Elon increasingly chose problems based on impact. He wasn't looking for the easiest opportunities. He was looking for the biggest problems. And history has a habit of rewarding people willing to solve problems everyone else avoids. By the time he graduated, the internet was beginning to reshape the world. Most people still didn't understand what it would become. Many believed it was little more than an interesting experiment. Elon saw something entirely different. He saw the beginning of a technological revolution that would transform communication, commerce, transportation, finance, and eventually almost every aspect of modern life. But seeing the future is one thing. Building it is something else entirely. Standing at the edge of adulthood with little money, enormous ambition, and ideas that sounded almost impossible, Elon Musk was about to take the first real step toward changing the world. He had survived bullying, loneliness, uncertainty, and emotional hardship. Those experiences hadn't broken him, they had forged him, and although he didn't know it yet, the greatest failures and the greatest successes of his life were still waiting just around the corner. Standing at the edge of adulthood, Elon Musk had almost nothing that society considers essential for success. He wasn't wealthy. He wasn't connected. He didn't come from Silicon Valley. He didn't have investors waiting to fund his ideas. What he had was something far more dangerous, an obsession with solving problems that everyone else believed were impossible. While most college graduates searched for secure jobs with stable salaries, Elon was asking a completely different question. What industries will shape humanity over the next 100 years? That single question would determine every major decision he would make for the rest of his life. During the mid-1990s, the internet was beginning to emerge. To many people, it looked like a curiosity, a place where people chatted online or visited primitive websites. But Elon saw something far bigger. He believed the internet would eventually transform every industry on Earth. Newspapers laughed at the idea. Business leaders dismissed it. Investors barely understood it. History would prove him right. But at that moment, being right didn't make life any easier. Seeing the future is lonely because almost nobody believes you until it becomes the present. In 1995, Elon made another decision that shocked the people around him. He was accepted into a PhD program in applied physics at Stanford University, one of the most prestigious universities in the world. For most people, that would have been the dream. Years of education leading to one of the best academic opportunities imaginable. Elon lasted 2 days. Just 2. He realized something important. The internet revolution wasn't waiting for anyone. If he stayed in school, he might become an expert in the future. But if he left immediately, he could help build that future himself. So he walked away from Stanford before classes had truly begun. Many thought he was making the biggest mistake of his life. In reality, he was making the first decision that would eventually change the world. Together with his younger brother, Kimball Musk, Elon founded a small software company called Zip2. It wasn't glamorous. They rented a tiny office. Money disappeared almost as quickly as they earned it. There were days when they couldn't afford an apartment. Instead of paying rent, Elon slept inside the office, sometimes on the floor, sometimes on a couch. He showered at a nearby YMCA because they couldn't afford proper housing. Imagine explaining that to someone today. One of the richest people in history once slept on the floor of his own startup because he couldn't afford rent. That's the part people erase when they talk about success. They celebrate the billionaire. They ignore the man sleeping in an office, surviving on determination alone. The days were endless. Elon programmed constantly. He often worked from early morning until well past midnight, 7 days a week, no vacations, no balance, just work. He believed that every hour mattered because competitors were moving just as fast. Years later, people would criticize his work ethic as extreme. They're probably right. But extraordinary outcomes rarely come from ordinary effort. Elon wasn't trying to build another company. He was trying to survive long enough for the world to understand his vision. Zip2 struggled in the beginning. Investors weren't lining up. Customers were difficult to convince. The internet still felt unfamiliar to many businesses. Newspapers didn't understand why they needed online city guides or digital maps. Every meeting became a battle. Every client required education before they required persuasion. Elon wasn't just selling software. He was selling a future most people couldn't imagine. And selling the future is one of the hardest things anyone can do because people naturally trust what already exists. Slowly, the company began gaining traction. More businesses joined. Revenue increased. Investors finally started paying attention. But with investment came conflict. Elon wanted to move aggressively, constantly improving the product and expanding into new opportunities. Eventually, Zip2 was acquired by Compaq for approximately $307 million. At just 27 years old, Elon received about $22 million from the sale. Most people would have stopped there, buy a mansion, travel the world, invest safely, retire early. Elon did the opposite. Instead of protecting his money, he risked almost all of it again. Why? Because wealth had never been his ultimate goal. Impact was. Almost immediately, he launched another company called XCOM. Today, that name sounds familiar for a different reason, but at the time it represented a radical idea. Elon believed banking could exist almost entirely online. Again, people laughed. The internet was still new. Trusting your money to an online company sounded ridiculous. Banks had existed for centuries. Why would anyone change? But Elon understood something many didn't. Technology doesn't ask for permission. If something is faster, easier, and more efficient, eventually people adopt it. XCOM later merged with another company and evolved into what the world now knows as PayPal. But the road wasn't smooth. Inside the company, disagreements grew. Leadership conflicts became intense. Elon was eventually removed as CEO while traveling on his honeymoon. Imagine building a company from the ground up only to lose control of it. Many entrepreneurs would have become bitter. Many would have spent years trying to recover emotionally. Elon did something different. He accepted the outcome and kept moving forward. That's another hidden trait behind extraordinary people. They rarely waste time trying to rewrite the past. Their focus stays on what's next. In 2002, eBay acquired PayPal for $1.5 billion. Elon Musk personally earned roughly $180 million after taxes. Once again, the obvious choice would have been retirement. He was wealthy beyond anything he had imagined as a child. Financial freedom had arrived. The game was over. Except, Elon didn't believe the game had even started. Around this time, he asked himself a question that sounded absurd. What are the biggest problems humanity must solve if it wants to survive? Most billionaires ask how to protect their fortune. Elon asked how to secure humanity's future. His answers became surprisingly simple. Sustainable energy, space exploration, artificial intelligence. These weren't trendy industries in the early 2000s. They were considered terrible investments. Electric cars had failed repeatedly. Private space companies barely existed. Artificial intelligence remained mostly academic research. Investors avoided these fields because they looked too risky. Elon saw the risk differently. He believed the greatest risk wasn't trying. It was allowing civilization to depend forever on outdated systems. His fascination with Mars also intensified. Ever since childhood, science fiction novels had convinced him that humanity's future couldn't remain limited to one planet. If civilization stayed entirely on Earth, one catastrophic event could wipe out everything humans had built. Becoming a multi-planetary species wasn't fantasy to him. It was insurance for civilization itself. At first, Elon simply wanted to send a small greenhouse to Mars as a public inspiration project. The goal wasn't colonization, it was symbolism. He traveled to Russia hoping to purchase refurbished intercontinental ballistic missiles that could be converted into rockets. The meetings became legendary. Russian engineers reportedly laughed at him. Some believed he wasn't serious. Others thought he was simply another wealthy businessman chasing an impossible dream. The negotiations collapsed. Elon flew home empty-handed. For many people, that would have ended the story. No rockets, no Mars, no SpaceX. But during the flight back to America, Elon began calculating something. What if rockets were expensive, not because they had to be, but because the industry had accepted expensive as normal? He started breaking down the cost of raw materials: aluminum, titanium, carbon fiber, electronics. Surprisingly, the actual materials represented only a small fraction of a rocket's final price. That realization changed everything. The problem wasn't physics. The problem was the system, and systems can be redesigned. That idea would soon become the foundation of SpaceX. At almost the same time, another opportunity appeared. Tesla Motors had already been founded by Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning. Elon joined as the company's largest investor and later became deeply involved in its direction. He believed electric vehicles weren't simply an environmental choice. They were inevitable. The question wasn't whether electric cars would replace gasoline vehicles. The question was, who would build them first? Friends thought he was losing his mind. He had already achieved financial freedom. Why risk everything? Why enter industries where almost everyone had failed? Because Elon had developed a philosophy during childhood that never left him. If something is important enough, you do it, even when the odds are against you. What nobody, including Elon himself, realized was that the hardest years of his entire life were only beginning. The companies he had just started would soon push him to the edge of financial ruin, public humiliation, and complete collapse. After surviving 2008, most people expected Elon Musk to slow down. He had nearly lost everything. His companies had come within weeks, perhaps even days, of disappearing forever. Most entrepreneurs would have taken the lesson as a warning. Protect what you've built. Avoid unnecessary risks. Enjoy the fortune you've earned. Elon did the exact opposite. Instead of becoming more conservative, he became even more ambitious, because surviving bankruptcy didn't make him afraid of failure. It made him realize something extraordinary. If you can survive your worst-case scenario, fear loses its power. SpaceX immediately shifted its focus towards something the aerospace industry considered impossible: reusable rockets. For over 50 years, humanity had accepted one simple idea. Rockets were disposable. You launched them once. They fell into the ocean, and you built another one. Imagine buying a brand new airplane for every single flight. That's essentially how space travel worked. It was unbelievably expensive, and everyone accepted it because that's just how rockets work. Elon asked a different question. What if they're wrong? Again. The same question that had followed him since childhood. What if the impossible isn't impossible, just unattempted? Engineers inside SpaceX weren't immediately convinced. Landing a rocket vertically sounded like science fiction. Critics laughed openly. NASA veterans dismissed the idea. Television hosts mocked the concept. People created compilations of SpaceX rockets exploding during landing tests. Every failure became another internet joke. Another reason people believed Elon Musk had finally gone too far. The early landing attempts looked almost comical. The rockets tipped over, exploded, lost control, burst into flames. Millions of dollars disappeared in seconds. Again, and again. But something unusual happened inside SpaceX. Nobody viewed those explosions as failures. They viewed them as data. Each explosion answered one question. Each mistake removed another unknown. That's one of Elon's most defining philosophies. Failure isn't the opposite of success. Failure is information, if you learn from it. While SpaceX continued chasing reusable rockets, Tesla faced an entirely different battle. Building a prototype is difficult. Building thousands of cars consistently is almost impossible. Manufacturing became the company's greatest enemy. Factories missed deadlines, robots malfunctioned, production lines stopped unexpectedly. Employees worked exhausting hours trying to solve problems no company had solved before. Elon often slept inside the Tesla factory, not for publicity, because there simply wasn't enough time to go home. Some nights he slept on conference room floors, other nights beside the production line itself. If workers were expected to sacrifice, he believed leadership should sacrifice first. The pressure became relentless. Wall Street predicted Tesla's bankruptcy almost every year. Short sellers made billions betting against the company. Analysts declared electric vehicles a temporary trend. Traditional automakers laughed. Many executives confidently claimed consumers would never abandon gasoline cars. Today, those same companies invest hundreds of billions of dollars into electric vehicles. History has a strange habit of rewarding people who are willing to look foolish first. Then came another revolutionary idea. Most automakers sold cars through dealerships. Elon wanted to sell directly to customers. Again. People said it couldn't be done. Again. He challenged the system. Again. The rules changed. As Tesla slowly grew, SpaceX continued rewriting aerospace history. Then came one of the most breathtaking engineering achievements ever witnessed. December 21st, 2015. After launching satellites into space, the Falcon 9 booster turned around, re-entered Earth's atmosphere, fired its engines, and landed vertically, perfectly. For a few seconds, the world simply watched. Then reality hit. A rocket had returned home. Something that decades of experts believed was unrealistic was suddenly standing upright on a landing pad. The applause inside SpaceX wasn't just celebration. It was relief, validation. Years of ridicule had finally transformed into proof. That single landing changed spaceflight forever. Launch costs dropped dramatically. Reusable rockets became reality. Governments began adapting. Private companies followed. The impossible had become standard. But Elon wasn't finished. Not even close. While Tesla transformed transportation and SpaceX transformed aerospace, he started thinking about another problem: artificial intelligence. Most people saw AI as software. Elon saw something much larger. He believed AI could eventually become humanity's greatest invention, or its greatest threat. That belief led him to help create OpenAI in its early days, before later parting ways, and eventually to found xAI years afterward. At the same time, another idea refused to leave his mind. What if computers could communicate directly with the human brain? That idea became Neuralink. Predictably, people laughed again. Brain implants, science fiction, impossible, dangerous. They had said similar things about reusable rockets, about electric cars, about online banking. Elon had become comfortable being underestimated because he understood something very few people ever do. The crowd is usually late. Being accepted too early often means your idea isn't revolutionary enough. Then came Starlink. Thousands of satellites orbiting Earth, providing internet access to remote parts of the world. Another project critics initially dismissed. Another project that eventually became reality. Schools in isolated villages, hospitals, disaster zones, war-torn regions, places that had never enjoyed reliable internet suddenly became connected. Again, the goal wasn't simply building another company, it was solving another massive problem. People often accuse Elon Musk of trying to do too much. Cars, rockets, artificial intelligence, brain interfaces, social media, robotics, energy storage. But from his perspective, they were never separate industries. They were pieces of the same puzzle. How do we improve humanity's future? That single question connects everything he has ever built. Of course. The journey remained controversial. Every major decision attracted criticism. Some admired him, others despised him. His public statements often divided opinion. His leadership style sparked intense debate. Employees described impossible expectations. Critics questioned his decisions. Supporters praised his vision. Few public figures have inspired stronger opinions. But regardless of where people stand, one fact remains impossible to deny. He changed industries that many believed couldn't be changed. He didn't simply compete. He forced entire sectors to evolve. Today, when people look at Elon Musk, they usually see the richest man in the world, the billionaire, the celebrity entrepreneur, the owner of extraordinary companies. What they don't immediately see is the lonely child reading books because he had no friends, the teenager teaching himself programming alone, the young entrepreneur sleeping on an office floor, the founder borrowing money while newspapers called him a millionaire, the man watching 3 rockets explode and deciding to build a 4th. Success has a strange way of erasing struggle. History remembers outcomes. Almost nobody remembers the years where success looked impossible. But those years were the most important, because they built the person capable of handling everything that came later. Elon Musk's greatest invention wasn't Tesla. It wasn't SpaceX. It wasn't PayPal. It wasn't Starlink. It wasn't Neuralink. His greatest creation was his mindset. The belief that every impossible problem is simply a problem that hasn't been solved yet. The willingness to look ridiculous, to fail publicly, to risk everything repeatedly, to continue when logic says stop. Most people spend their lives avoiding failure. Elon repeatedly walked directly toward it. Not because he enjoyed losing, but because he understood something profound. Every extraordinary achievement looks unreasonable until the day it succeeds. Before the reusable rockets, there were explosions. Before Tesla dominated electric vehicles, there was bankruptcy. Before billions, there were sleepless nights on office floors. Before history called him a genius, many called him delusional. And maybe that's the hidden truth behind every revolutionary life. The world almost always mistakes vision for madness, until vision becomes reality. Because before the glory, there is ridicule. Before success, there is uncertainty. Before history remembers your name, there are years where almost nobody believes in you. The greatest breakthroughs in history were rarely created by people who followed the safest path. They were created by people willing to sacrifice comfort for possibility. People willing to risk failure for progress. People willing to endure years of doubt because they believed tomorrow could be different from today. Elon Musk became one of those people. Not because life was easy, not because success was guaranteed, but because every obstacle that should have convinced him to quit instead convinced him to push even harder. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson his story offers. Your circumstances do not determine your destination. Your willingness to continue does. Because in the end, the difference between those who change history and those who simply watch it happen is often nothing more than one decision. The decision to keep going when everyone else thinks the story is over. And that is what comes before the glory.